Black History Month, a great time to celebrate Black Americans. Hi, my name is Ethan and I am here to answer one of the biggest questions about this holiday. Why do we celebrate Black History Month? What is its origin? And why is it celebrated in February? Well, Black History Month is an annual celebration of achievements by African Americans in recognizing what they did for the U.S. The story of Black History Month begins in the 1900s, half a century after the 13th Amendment abolished slavery in the United States. Known today as the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, the association decided to choose the second week of February to coincide with the birthdays of Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass. The event inspired schools and communities everywhere to organize celebrations, history clubs, performances, and lectures talking about Black African Americans. Then in 1976, President of the United States Gerald Ford officially recognized Black History Month and called upon the public to seize the opportunity to honor the two often neglected accomplishments of Black Americans in every area of endeavor throughout our history. And since 1976, every American president has designated February as Black History Month and endorsed a specific theme. The theme for Black History Month in 2021 is Black Family Representation, Identity, and Diversity. Explores the African diaspora and the spread of Black families across the United States. As far as why it is celebrated in February, it was chosen because it coincided with the birthday of Abraham Lincoln on February 12th and of Frederick Douglass on February 20th, both of which states Black communities had celebrated together since the late 19th century. And on that note, I hope that you guys learned something from my presentation and will appreciate Black Americans more. Back to the studio.
Martin Luther King Jr., originally named Michael King Jr., was born on January 15, 1929 in Atlanta, Georgia. He was the middle child of Michael King Sr. and Alberta Williams King. Both his grandfather and father were Baptist preachers, and both of his parents were college educated. Martin Luther King Jr. received an adequate education and grew up in a loving family. In 1944, when King was 15, he entered Morehouse College in Atlanta. There he favored studies in medicine and law, but those were quickly eclipsed as he decided to enter the ministry in his senior year as his father has urged him to do so. Later in his life, civil rights advocates decided to contest racial segregation in Montgomery, Alabama's public bus system following what had happened on December 1st, 1955 with Rosa Parks. The activists formed the Montgomery Improvement Association to boycott the city's public transportation system and chose Martin Luther King Jr. to be their leader. King would then continue to boycott the transit system and give speeches demanding desegregation of the transit system, even at the risk of the safety of his own family, until the buses were finally desegregated. In 1957, Martin Luther King Jr. and other civil rights leaders established the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. This was a group that helped local organizations carry out civil rights activities in the South. As King was a leader of the SCLC, he inspired many African Americans throughout the South to hold peaceful sit-ins. In 1959, King even went to India to meet with the Prime Minister to discuss Gandhi's concepts of peaceful noncompliance. This convinced him that nonviolence resistance was clearly the most effective way to fight against injustice and oppression. Martin Luther King Jr. gave his I Have a Dream speech on August 28, 1963 during the March on Washington, a major civil rights demonstration. He would then move on to win the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964, making him the youngest man to receive the Nobel Peace Prize. But sadly, he was assassinated on April 4, 1968. Now you may be wondering, how does Martin Luther King Jr. affect the world today? Well, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had a vision where we can all exist in a society where race is not an issue in how we are treated. King was mainly responsible for the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights of 1965, and the Fair Housing Act of 1968. Martin Luther King Jr. also influenced international law and the symbol of peace, equality, and hope all over the world. Overall, I was able to learn so much from my research. I was able to learn about the everlasting impacts of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s efforts on the world today and his efforts to stop discrimination and racial segregation. All in all, I was able to learn so much, and I hope you also learned something new about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. today.
I'm sure that everyone has heard the name Rosa Parks. Everyone knows that she's the woman who refused to give up her bus seat to a white man in Montgomery. But today, let's delve deeper into her life and get to know her more as a person and her past, leading up to the events that catapulted her to fame. During her time period, racism was still very common and segregation was the norm. White people and black people could not sit in the same areas, and the white people's rights were always prioritized over the black people. There were even water fountains separated for the different races. Rosa Louise Macaulay was born on February 4th, 1913 in Tuskegee, Alabama. Her parents were James and Leona Macaulay, and her brother's name was Sylvester, and he was born in 1915. Shortly after her brother's birth, her parents divorced. Rosa's mother was a teacher, so her family valued education greatly. Rosa moved to Montgomery, Alabama at age 11 and started attending high school there. She left school at age 16, early in 11th grade, because she needed to take care of her dying grandmother, and shortly thereafter, her mother fell ill as well. In 1932, at age 19, she married Raymond Parks, a self-educated man 10 years older than her, who worked as a barber and was a longtime member of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, which is also known as the NAACP. He supported Rosa in her efforts to earn her high school diploma, which she ultimately did the following year. Fast forward a few years, Rosa was asked to give her seat on a bus to a white man, and she refused. This was an admirable act of civil disobedience. That's a summary of Rosa Parks' story. This relates to our modern world because we should combat discrimination the way she did. She protested peacefully and always stood her ground against injustices. As a journalist, I've learned a lot more about her childhood past and general information about her. I think we can all learn from her bravery of standing up against discrimination. I hope you enjoyed.
Hi there, I'm Iris, and today we'll be talking about a very special person, artist Jacob Lawrence, who has the time period from the year 1917 to 2000.
You might have heard who he was due to his famous series called the Migration Series, which tells the story of Black Americans moving from the South to the North after World War I. His participation in the Harlem Renaissance, painting artworks that reflected the treatment towards Black people. Jacob Lawrence was born on September 7, 1917, in Atlantic City, New Jersey. As a child, Jacob lived in a foster care facility since his parents got a divorce and his mom was looking for a job to take care of Jacob and his siblings. After reuniting with his mother, Jacob's mother encouraged him to explore art and enrolled him at Utopia Children's Center, which had an after-school program. Even though Jacob dropped out of school at the age of 16, he still pursued art as a career. In 1937, he won a scholarship to the American Art School in New York, and in 1939, he graduated with funds from the Works Progress Administration Federal Art Project and began his artistic career.
During World War II, Jacob was drafted into the United States Coast Guard with the job of documenting the war experience through paintings. He created up to 50 paintings, but sadly all of them got lost. In 1949, he admitted himself into the Hillside Hospital in Queens as a patient of depression and staying there for over a year. No one really knows why he was stressed out, but it could be because he didn't fit the mold of other artists, having popularity and having fame for all their works.
He started to produce artworks such as Martinist paintings that reflected his emotional state, incorporating subdued colors and melancholy figures in his paintings, which was a sharp contrast to his other works. Modernism was a break from the past and the current search for new forms of expression. It was a period of experimentation in the arts from the late 19th to the mid-20th century, particularly in the years following World War I.
Now you might be asking yourself, does this affect us in the future? Actually, it does. Previously, I mentioned one of his most famous works, the Migration Series, right?
The series was exhibited at Edith Halpert's Downtown Gallery in New York in 1942, making Jacob Lawrence the first African American to join the gallery.
Honestly, before researching this artist, I had no idea what his impact was on us. When he was in the hospital, he still continued to produce paintings, and I was really surprised when he did that. And that makes me really inspired to do the same as he does, to take my surroundings, whether they're good or bad, and put them in an art form, just like what Jacob Lawrence did. Well, thank you for visiting this segment of Jacob Lawrence. I'm Iris, and I'll see you next time.